Please.
Grazie. Thank you. Well, first of all, allow me to say a big thank you, grazie, to all the contribution you gave today, for the very insightful discussions we had yesterday. Also, I think it was very, very productive. And the contribution, of course, that you gave today on financing infrastructure for the recovery and for long-term sustainable economic growth. We have heard from the Italian G20 presidency, and by the way, I thank the ministers Franco, Giovannini, and Cingolani for taking the time to be here. So we heard their ambitious plan to foster infrastructure investments globally that we hope will be endorsed from the Leaders' Summit. In its work since January, the G20 Italian presidency has established sustainable infrastructure as a key priority for global recovery. Digitalization, green infrastructure, the risking mechanism for the private sector, the blending of private and public resources, and the implementation of the principle for quality infrastructure investments are at the core of the Italian G20 presidency efforts. In particular, during the last Finance Ministers' Summit in Venice, it has stressed the importance of involving the private sector to boost the recovery in the aftermath of the pandemic. This is the reason why today representatives from the private sector, think tanks, multilaterals, as well as national development banks have come alongside to connect and set in a joint statement a number of common priorities which we will push to see adopted by the G20. As long-term investors, we are committed to giving a positive outlook to the future of investment in infrastructure. Our mission is crucial as a bridge between the private and the public sector to finance the increasing global infrastructure investment gap and unleash the great potential of private investments in green and quality infrastructure. Indeed, and it emerged quite clearly in today's discussion, private capital are greatly needed in Europe and in the rest of the world to accelerate the green transition, to achieve a long-term recovery, and to ensure reaching the ambitious carbon neutrality targets many countries are now setting. Even before the pandemic, the infrastructure investment needs were estimated in the order of $6.2 trillion a year until 2030, just to overcome the global infrastructure shortcomings. Estimation that rises to $6.9 trillion per year when considering also the Paris Agreement objectives and the Sustainable Development Goals. We as Cassa, Depositi and Prestiti and as D20 Long-Term Investors Club are ready to increase our efforts and fully commit to boosting private investment in quality and green infrastructure investments, especially in developing countries. The D20 Statement 2021 marks this intention, representing a number of policy actions that, if carried out, could facilitate a greater involvement of long-term investors and the private sector in infrastructure investments. Three are the main areas emerging as priorities to foster private investment. First, investment-ready mature project pipelines to facilitate the participation of private and institutional investors. Second, long-term infrastructure investment plans by government. And third, de-risking mechanisms. Moreover, it is crucial to establish a level playing field for infrastructure investment worldwide to ensure accountability and accelerate the achievement of environmental and social goals. The D20 Long-Term Investment Club could also strengthen the current best practice exchanges with a dialogue among long-term investors on the review and update of current lending policy in the form of a technical working group methodology we already use. Again, it's very important that we as long-term financiers join forces and give clear signals that we want to be part of the solution, and we need to exactly agree on the standards, on the lending policy we want to adopt, on what we want to do, and also what we no longer want to do. To keep track of policy progress and to continue pushing for a positive financing infrastructure agenda, it will be crucial to establish a permanent dialogue mechanism, such as the 2021 G20 Infrastructure Investors Dialogue we helped organize in June, between the G20 and the main infrastructure stakeholders, such as institutional investors, national and multilateral development banks, general contractors, and asset management. Cassa, Depositi and Prestiti, as a D20 Long-Term Investment Club member and as a national promotional bank, wants to be an actor of positive change, with the aim of sustaining the transition to a more sustainable economic model. We are ready to commit to the aforementioned actions and activate funding to realize long-term quality infrastructure investment that can be beneficial for the communities involved and for the natural ecosystem. To do so, we will leverage the experience gained being this year host for the D20 Long-Term Investment Club, and next October's, as Antonella was just mentioning, Financing Commons Summit, our partnership with the EIB, as well as our role in implementing the Next Generation EU plan for Italy. I do warmly thank you again for your important contributions, and I do hope to see you at the Financing Commons Summit, which represent another complementary platform for cooperation. We'll work to make there a further step towards the identification of concrete actions for infrastructure financing, in particular in sectors and regions where it is most needed. Today, it emerged quite clearly that we share a common vision, and it is time to make our actions transformative for the generations to come and to ensure better living conditions for our communities and the planet. Thank you. I now, I hope she is connected.
Yeah, we will try to see.
We are trying?
Yes.
Okay. Dear Minister Indrawati, Minister of Finance of Indonesia, I now give you the floor and again pass you the helm of this very interesting event. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dario Scannapieco. Excellency Daniel Franco, Minister of the Economy and Finance of Italy, Mr. Giovanni Gorno Tempini, CDP President, and Mr. Werner Hoyer, EIB and D20 LTIC President, Mr. Dario Scannapieco, CDP Chief Executive Officer, Head of Government Institution, Private Sector, and distinguished speaker participant. Good evening to all of you in Rome, and good morning or afternoon or night for those of you elsewhere. It is truly an honor for me to be here today to deliver closing remark. We would like to convey our highest appreciation to the Italian G20 presidency, CDP, D20 LTIC, B20 and T20 for conducting today's strategic discussion directed to promoting long-term investment in infrastructure. The conference brings together the key stakeholders needed to deliver the infrastructure that is necessary to realize our shared ambition of a just transition to a sustainable future. Financial institutions, institutional investors, and the official sector have complementary role in delivering long-term investment in infrastructure. That is both part of the global recovery and also a recovery that leads to long-term sustainable growth. This conference discussed two very important topics. First, bridging gaps and fostering partnership between government and private investors to drive infrastructure development. And secondly, sustainability as the guiding star for future quality infrastructure investment. Honorable ladies and gentlemen, 1.5 years into the evolving COVID-19 pandemic, The global economy is showing signs of recovery. The IMF latest World Economic Outlook revised up the 2021 growth projection to 6%, a stronger outlook that envisaged in October 2020. However, I believe that we are all share the view that the outlook remains uncertain. COVID-19 still creates high level of uncertainty. Moreover, even if the global outlook is brighter, that is not the case for all emerging markets, nor for the vulnerable groups in our economies. Governments have worked hard to protect people and strengthen economies through extraordinary fiscal and monetary policy responses. These strong interventions have maintained jobs and prevented many millions from falling into poverty. An unprecedented level of fiscal stimulus, including spending on health and social protection to contain the pandemic impact, has resulted in limited fiscal space. The government must work with the private sector to promote economic recovery and to ensure that the path followed leads to sustainable development. Global Infrastructure Hub analysis showed that the G20 government has made a substantial commitment to infrastructure investment as part of the COVID stimulus. Since January 2021, G20 members and guest economies have announced around 16 trillion US dollar of fiscal measure in response to the COVID crisis. Employment protection and household income support accounted for half of this stimulus in the G20 advanced economy, while in the G20 emerging economies, infrastructure investment and employment protection receive the most support. Ladies and gentlemen, governments are today being called on to deliver a transformative recovery against the backdrop of this pandemic, as well as mounting concern about the pace of climate change. Accelerating infrastructure investment is a critical part of the transformation, as well as improving productivity and also resiliency. Infrastructure investment can help ensure the emerging market and less developed economies are part of the global recovery. The IMF has highlighted that concerted effort by those with fiscal space along with smaller contribution by others can increase the level of global real GDP by close to 2% by 2025. This would be a boost to growth that can help create a shared global recovery. Identifying alternative sources of financing infrastructure is a priority. This is especially true in view of fiscal constraint. As discussed during the conference, mobilizing private financing for sustainable infrastructure is really the key to solving this challenge. Private sector financial savings are more than adequate to help bring about transformation. But the challenge, of course, is how to unlock this financing for sustainable infrastructure development and bridge the infrastructure investment gap. Risk and project preparation are challenges identified by private sector that need to be overcome. Government can help address private sector risks, as can the multilateral by de-risking projects that can leverage this official funding through strong private sector involvement. More generally, government can increase investor awareness and commitment to incorporate sustainability and ESG consideration into their quality infrastructure investment decision. The shared involvement of this official financing and also investment community can be a vehicle to bring innovative technology to help get us on a sustainable path. Hence, dialogue between public and private investors will continue to be very critical and important if we are to realize the shared opportunity. This dialogue is in line with the G20 roadmap to infrastructure as an asset class and building on the G20 OECD report on the collaboration with institutional investor and asset manager on infrastructure. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, infrastructure development is a national priority for Indonesia as the G20 presidency and host next year. It is essential to improve people access to basic services and to boost productivity as well as improving competitiveness. The government allocated around 470 trillion rupiah. This is equal to 29.16 billion US dollar for infrastructure in 2021 budget only. Our infrastructure development and transformation is aimed at accelerating development across our region. This is especially needed for the underdeveloped frontier and outermost area of Indonesia. Indonesia initiated PPP framework since 2005 in order to mobilize private sector investment in infrastructure. A challenge for the PPP was to change ways of thinking about cooperation with the private sector. Collaboration with the private sector is often seen from a narrow perspective, and in less developed economies, the domestic private sector often lack of effective capacity. The government provides several forms of support in order to make the PPP work. First, the government guaranteed to convince the private sector that the government will be responsible for specified project risk. The guarantee clearly increased the bankability of a project. In addition to guarantee, the government also provides a cash contribution to raise the financial viability of a project. In addition, a government mechanism, we call it availability payment, was introduced several years ago. This is an option to ensure the cash flow of the PPP project as well as eliminate demand risk for private sector investors. The government also provides a project development facility, or PDF, for the government contracting agency, which aligns the fiscal perspective with the project interests, making the fiscal management related to the PPP transaction more manageable. At our finance ministry, we use special mission vehicle or SMVs to bring flexibility for private sector investors and also for fund management. Currently, we have 28 PPP projects with a total investment value of almost 17 billion US dollar. Those projects are mostly in the toll road, drinking water, and ICT sectors. From the Indonesia PPP experience, we see that developing countries are facing significant challenges in attracting private sector involvement, particularly from global investors. Improving the risk perception for developing countries require leveraging international support from developed countries and also international development partners, and strengthening collaboration across development bank as well as private sector financiers, and also infrastructure investors are needed to get us on the path to global sustainable development. Let me underscore that Indonesia is looking to attract private investment in infrastructure, and that this does offer a great opportunity for global private sector companies to expand their market. After all, Indonesia is among G20 with the largest economy, and we are the largest Southeast Asia countries. Honorable ladies and gentlemen, we are all agreed that infrastructure has the potential to contribute a stronger economic recovery, especially after a knockdown from the COVID. And this is also essential to tackle climate challenge. Sound infrastructure investment today can shape the nation's economic, environmental, and social trajectory for decades. Consequently, it is essential that as we undertake infrastructure investment, we do so through the lens of sustainable development. The environment, social, and governance aspect of infrastructure development will thus continue to be a growing important. Tackling and mitigating the consequences of climate change, developing alternative energy, ensuring that our community are part of the solution to our sustainable development challenges, rather than being as a victim of all those issues, where the private sector need to help government define the sustainable solution and how they can be implemented. Some in private sector are making great strides toward increasing the circularity of their activities. We need this innovation to be reflected also in infrastructure and in the developing world. Economic recovery can be designed to achieve a better balance between economic, social, and environmental outcome, and to shape a long-term greener pathway toward a sustainable and resilient world. We underline the importance of mutual understanding and responsibility between developing countries and developed countries to deliver the most effective outcome to deal with climate change issue globally. In accelerating development toward a low-carbon economy, international commitment to provide access to affordable financing and technology are definitely needed for developing and emerging countries as well as low-income countries to participate in this sustainable development goals. This will make an important contribution to a just and affordable transition for developing and least developed economy to achieve their commitment to lowering emission without undermining their development need and economies. Thus, the participation of responsible investors is also crucial in climate funding. This is to achieve economic sustainability and prosperity for all. In closing, I invite all of you at this forum to play your part in the global challenge of pursuing sustainable long-term growth, especially through infrastructure development. I am convinced that stronger cooperation between government, the private sector, development agency, and other financial institutions will achieve better outcome. In 2022, Indonesia will assume the presidency of the G20. We will ensure that the G20 will continue to be a valuable platform for determining the role of infrastructure in the sustainable development agenda and in recovering the economy. We look forward to the G20 discussion to follow up on the strategic recommendation that have been provided by this important forum. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in Indonesia.
So we thank very much the Minister for the insights, very interesting. And We thank all of you, panelists, participants, the ones who made it in presence and the ones who have followed us virtually. I hope you have found the conference interesting. I did, so maybe we can share this. And we'll bring in your own companies, think tanks, or at work in general, some of the insights you have gathered here today. Thank you very much, and goodbye to everyone.